What if the choices you made in a game, had like real consequences, not just game over, but choices that really like rippled through the world and changed things,
Yeah.
forever. That's the kind of quest that sticks with you, right?
Hmm.
I was thinking about this after a tabletop RPG session I was in recently. We were trying to like recover a stolen artifact, but the quest kind of quickly became about something much bigger. We had to decide whether to side with a powerful faction or risk everything to protect this small village. The emotional weight of that decision, the impact it had on the game world, it just blew me away.
Wow.
So joining us today is an expert in RPGs and interactive storytelling, and they can help us unpack what makes a truly memorable quest, especially in 2025.
Well, it sounds like you experienced a quest that really nailed one of the most crucial elements,
Yeah.
emotional stakes. It's not just about achieving a goal, it's about making players feel something as they progress. You know? The article we have from LitRPG Reads really emphasizes that point. The author Paul Bello argues that in 2025, players crave more than just go here, kill that missions. They want quests that tap into their empathy, their sense of heroism, even their fear.
So how do you create those emotional stakes? Is it just about adding those dramatic cutscenes or heart-wrenching dialogue?
It can be, but it's often more effective to, weave those emotions into the choices players make. The example you shared about protecting the village. Perfect. It's a dilemma that forces players to weigh their priorities, and the outcome has a tangible impact on the world around them.
That makes sense. It's not just about witnessing something emotional,
Yeah.
but being the cause of those emotions.
Exactly. And those choices become even more powerful when they're tied to player agency. That's the second key element highlighted in the article. Player agency is all about giving players a sense of ownership over the story. It's about making them feel like their decisions actually matter.
The source material suggests some really intriguing ways to do this. For example, what if past actions come back to haunt the players? Like imagine a character who made a selfish choice early on, and that decision comes back with unforeseen consequences later in the game.
That's a great example of how to create a sense of continuity and make the world feel responsive to player choices. Another technique Paul Bello mentions is tailoring quests to specific character classes or backstories. Imagine a quest that only a rogue with a specific skill set could undertake, or a storyline that directly ties into a character's past.
It's all about creating that feeling of, this quest was made for me.
Exactly. It makes the players feel like they're not just playing a game, they're living a story that's uniquely theirs.
Okay, so we've got emotional stakes and player agency. What's the third element that makes a quest truly unforgettable?
Dynamic world interaction. It's about creating a world that feels alive, a world that reacts to the player's actions and changes over time.
So it's more than just a static backdrop for the story.
Yes. Think of it like this. In a truly dynamic world, NPCs aren't just quest givers or obstacles. They have their own motivations, their own relationships. And those things can change based on how the players interact with them. The article gives the example of a charismatic cult leader, one who genuinely believes they're doing the right thing. It creates a morally ambiguous situation that challenges players' assumptions and forces them to think carefully about how they approach the encounter.
So instead of just having a clear-cut villain, you have a character who's complex and perhaps even sympathetic.
Right. And it's not just about NPCs. The environment itself can play a role. Imagine a dungeon that changes based on player choices, or a landscape that's been ravaged by a war the players were involved in.
Those kinds of details really add a layer of realism and make the world feel so much more immersive. So we're talking about quests that are emotionally engaging, driven by player choice, and set in a world that feels alive. That's a pretty high bar for game masters.
It is, but it's also what makes designing quests so exciting. The article stresses that 2025 isn't about overwhelming GMs with complex systems or impossible expectations. It's about giving them tools and inspiration to create truly unique and memorable experiences for their players.
That makes sense. It's not about making things harder, it's about making them better.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of player-driven storytelling really shines.
Now, we've touched on player agency, but how does player-driven storytelling take that a step further?
It's about understanding that each player comes to the table with their own motivations. Some might be driven by a thirst for vengeance, others by a desire for knowledge, still others by a need to protect those they love. A truly great quest will tap into those individual motivations and weave them into the fabric of the story.
So instead of having one-size-fits-all quest, you're creating a personalized experience for each player.
In a way, yes, it's about making the players feel like the story is personal to them. Their decisions have weight not just because they affect the world, but because they affect the things that matter to their characters.
The article mentions some specific techniques for achieving this, like tying the main plot of a quest to a player's backstory, or introducing rival NPCs whose goals clash with the player's own. It's fascinating to think about how those small touches can make a world of difference in how a player experiences a quest.
And it doesn't have to be complicated. Even something as simple as an NPC mentioning a rumor they heard about the players or a change in the environment that's a direct result of a past choice. Those things can make the world feel more responsive and personalized.
So it's not just about grand gestures, it's about those little details that make the world feel truly alive.
Precisely. And those details become even more important when we're talking about challenges and rewards.
Right, because a quest can be emotionally engaging and driven by player choice,
Yeah,
but it still needs to be fun to play.
exactly. And in 2025, fun doesn't just mean combat. Players are looking for a variety of challenges that test their skills and their ingenuity.
So what are some of the challenges that go beyond that hack and slash combat?
Well, the article talks about the importance of balancing challenge, mystery, and reward. It suggests incorporating puzzles, social intrigue, and exploration alongside combat encounters.
So maybe the players have to decipher ancient runes to unlock a hidden door, or negotiate a peace treaty between two warring factions.
Exactly. And the rewards should go beyond just loot and experience points. They should feel meaningful to the players and tie into their motivations.
Maybe a player who's driven by knowledge is rewarded with a rare book, one that sheds light on a mystery they've been trying to solve.
Or a player who's driven by protecting others might be rewarded with the gratitude of a village they saved from bandits.
It's about making the players feel like they're actually achieving something that matters, not just going through the motions.
And it's about making those achievements feel personal and impactful.
The source material really emphasizes the role of dynamic NPCs in creating those impactful moments.
You're right. It's not just about having a cool villain or a helpful mentor. It's about populating the world with characters who feel real, who surprise the players, and who maybe even make them question their own assumptions.
Give me an example of that. What kind of NPC would really shake things up?
Imagine a quest where the players have to deal with an informant, one whose loyalties keep shifting depending on the situation.
That's a great example. It creates a sense of uncertainty and makes the players think carefully about who they can trust.
And it adds a layer of moral ambiguity that can lead to some really interesting role-playing moments. So far, we've been talking about quest design in a fairly traditional sense, but we're living in 2025. What are some of the new tools and technologies that are changing the game?
Right.
Well, one of the most exciting developments is the rise of AI and procedural generation in quest design.
Now, I'll admit, when I first heard about AI in RPGs, I was a bit skeptical. I thought, isn't that going to take away from the human element of the game?
It's a valid concern. But in practice, AI is proving to be a powerful tool for GMs. It's not about replacing human creativity, it's about enhancing it. Think of it like having a co-DM who's always working behind the scenes, generating content and keeping things fresh.
So how does that actually work? Give me a concrete example.
Well, imagine using AI to generate dynamic dialogue for NPCs. Instead of having to write out every possible conversation tree, the GM can simply input some key information about the NPC's personality and goals, and the AI will handle the rest.
So the AI becomes a sort of co-writer, helping to flesh out the details of the world.
Exactly. And because the AI can react to player input in real time, it can create conversations that feel truly organic and unpredictable.
That sounds incredible. It would free up the GM to focus on the big picture, on the overall flow of the story, and on making sure that every player is having a great time. What about procedural generation? That's another term I hear a lot, but I'm not entirely sure what it means in practice.
Think of procedural generation as a way to create content on the fly, based on certain parameters. It can be used to generate anything from dungeon layouts to entire quest lines.
So instead of meticulously handcrafting every detail, you can use procedural generation to create unique and unexpected content.
Exactly. Imagine using procedural generation to create a sprawling dungeon with a unique layout every time you play. You can set certain parameters, like the number of rooms, the types of traps and monsters, and the overall theme. And the AI will generate a one-of-a-kind experience based on your input.
That's amazing. It would add a whole new layer of unpredictability to the game.
And it would free up the GM to focus on the things that only a human can do, like crafting compelling narratives and responding to unexpected player choices.
Okay, so we've got AI generating dialogue and dungeons. But what about inspiration? Where do those initial ideas come from?
One of the most important things the article emphasizes is the importance of drawing inspiration from the real world.
Even with all this amazing technology, we're still going back to basics.
Absolutely. There's an endless well of stories to be found in history, in folklore, in our own lived experiences.
I love the idea of taking a historical event or an urban legend and adapting it to a fantasy setting.
Or imagine basing a quest on a cultural tradition from a different part of the world. It's about taking something familiar and giving it a fantastical twist.
And it's about making the world feel more grounded, more believable, even if it's populated by dragons and wizards. Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we have to talk about the classics.
Ah, yes. The fetch quests, the dungeon crawls. They may be traditional, but they're not going anywhere.
But what's exciting is that even those classic quest types are getting a makeover in 2025.
It's all about finding ways to make them fresh, to give them a modern twist that aligns with the expectations of today's players.
So instead of just sending players off to retrieve a magical sword, maybe that sword is actually a key to an ancient prophecy.
Or maybe the dungeon isn't a static environment. Maybe it changes based on the player's choices. Or maybe it's inhabited by creatures with unique abilities that force the players to think outside the box.
The article provides some really interesting examples. Like, imagine a fetch quest, where the item the players are looking for isn't what it seems. Maybe it's cursed, or maybe it's sentient, or maybe it has a hidden purpose that the players need to uncover.
Or imagine a dungeon crawl where the environment itself is a puzzle. Maybe the walls shift and change, or maybe the gravity fluctuates, or maybe the players have to use their wits to navigate a series of illusions.
Those are the kinds of twists that take a familiar concept and make it feel brand new again. That's what I love about the future of tabletop RPGs. There's this amazing blend of cutting-edge technology and timeless storytelling principles.
It's a really exciting time to be a GM, that's for sure.
Well, this has been a fascinating first look at what makes a truly unforgettable quest in 2025.
We've only scratched the surface, but I think we've laid a good foundation for understanding the key elements that make a quest stand out.
Definitely. And I'm already starting to think about how I can apply these ideas to my own games.
Me too. It's inspiring to think about all the possibilities, thinking about those classic quest structures. It's crucial to remember that different players enjoy different aspects of the game. Some folks live for the thrill of combat, while others are all about the role-playing and the social intrigue. Understanding those different play styles and preferences, that's key when we design quests in, 2025.
That reminds me of something Paul Bellow mentioned in the article. He talked about the importance of designing quests that cater to a variety of preferences. Specifically, he highlighted the difference between narrative-driven quests and sandbox quests.
Those are two excellent examples. They highlight the spectrum of player preferences. Narrative-driven quests are all about a strong, predetermined storyline. They offer a clear beginning, middle, and end, with well-developed characters and a compelling plot.
So for players who love to get lost in a good story and feel like they're part of something epic, a narrative-driven quest would be a great fit.
Exactly. However, there's often less freedom for players to deviate from the main path or explore their own ideas in a narrative-driven quest.
That's where sandbox quests come in, right?
Yeah.
Those are all about giving players agency and
Oh.
letting them shape the world and the story.
Precisely. Imagine a vast, open world with tons of possibilities. The players can choose what quests to pursue, what alliances to forge, and even what kind of characters they want to be. It's like a giant playground for their imagination.
That sounds incredibly freeing, but I imagine there are unique challenges that come with designing a sandbox quest.
The biggest one is that it requires much more preparation from the GM. You can't just rely on a, pre-written story. You have to be ready for anything the players might throw at you. There's also a risk that the game could feel aimless, without a strong narrative thread to tie everything together.
So finding the right balance for your group is key. Some players might thrive in a structured narrative, while others might crave the freedom of a sandbox. Perhaps some players enjoy a mix of both. A main storyline provides direction, but there's still plenty of opportunities for side quests and exploration.
That's a great point. The key is to really understand your players and what they're looking for in a game. It all comes back to that idea of personalization that we talked about earlier.
And it's not just about the overall structure of the quest. We also need to think about the types of challenges that different players enjoy. Some players love the tactical complexity of combat, while others prefer to solve puzzles. or navigate social encounters.
Absolutely. Paul Bellow talks about this in the article as well. He breaks it down into three main categories: social quests, combat quests, and puzzle quests.
Social quests, as the name suggests, are all about interpersonal interaction. This is where role-playing really shines. Imagine quests that involve political negotiations, courtly intrigue, or even just persuading a stubborn NPC to help you out.
These quests require players to use their words, their charisma, and their understanding of social dynamics to achieve their goals. They can be incredibly rewarding, especially for players who enjoy exploring the nuances of character interaction and who might not be as interested in combat-heavy scenarios.
And then there are those players who absolutely live for the thrill of combat. For them, a well-designed combat quest is the ultimate test of skill and strategy.
Think epic boss battles, daring raids, or even fending off a horde of monsters. These quests allow players to test their combat prowess, optimize their character builds, and feel like powerful heroes.
And we can't forget about the puzzle solvers. A good puzzle quest can be just as engaging and rewarding as a combat or social encounter.
Imagine quests that involve deciphering ancient riddles, navigating complex mazes, or even just figuring out how to open a tricky lock. These quests require players to think creatively, solve problems, and work together as a team.
The best part is that you don't have to choose just one type of quest. A well-designed campaign will offer a mix of all three to keep things fresh and engaging for everyone at the table.
I couldn't agree more. You might have a social quest that leads into a combat encounter, which then culminates in a puzzle that needs to be solved to progress the story.
It's all about creating a variety of experiences so that every player has a chance to shine and use their unique strengths.
Variety keeps things fresh, but there's one element that's essential to any great quest, no matter the type: high stakes.
Especially when we're talking about endgame quests, the culmination of a long campaign. These are the quests that should feel truly epic, the ones where the fate of the world hangs in the balance.
They should challenge the players on every level, testing their skills, their ingenuity, and their resolve. They should offer meaningful choices that have a lasting impact on the world and its inhabitants.
Paul Bellow offers some great ideas for creating those high-stakes endgame quests. He talks about battles against cosmic entities, desperate attempts to avert world-shattering events, and even quests that involve traveling through time or across dimensions.
Those are some truly epic scenarios. The key is to make players feel like their actions truly matter, like they're shaping the destiny of the world.
And of course, to create a sense of closure, of having reached the culmination of their journey.
It's about crafting a finale that's both satisfying and memorable, one that will leave the players talking about it for years to come.
Speaking of memorable experiences, I think it's worth taking a moment to reflect on how technology is changing the way we play RPGs. We have access to tools and resources that were unimaginable just a few years ago.
It's a really exciting time to be a GM. We've already touched on AI and procedural generation, but these technologies are opening up whole new possibilities for quest design. Imagine using AI to create dynamic dungeons that change based on player actions, or to generate complex NPCs with unique personalities and motivations.
And procedural generation can be used to create vast, sprawling worlds, full of secrets and surprises. It's like having a co-DM who's always working behind the scenes, generating content and keeping things fresh.
And the best part is that these technologies are still evolving. Who knows what amazing tools will be available to us in the years to come?
It's mind-blowing to think about. But with all this talk about technology, it's important to remember that the heart of any great RPG is still the human element. The connection between the players, the shared experience of storytelling, the joy of creating something together, that's what makes tabletop RPGs so special. It's something that no amount of technology can ever replace.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the latest tools and trends, but ultimately it's the human connection that makes these games so meaningful. Speaking of human connection, I love that Paul Bellow emphasizes the importance of drawing inspiration from the real world, even with all the advancements in AI and procedural generation.
That's so important. There's an endless well of stories to be found in history, folklore, and our own lived experiences.
Yeah.
It's about taking those real-world elements and weaving them into fantastical narratives.
Exactly. Maybe it's basing a quest on a historical event, or adapting a myth or legend to a fantasy setting.
Or even just drawing inspiration from contemporary issues and social movements. It's about grounding the fantastical in the real, making the world feel more believable and relatable.
And it's about connecting the players to something bigger than themselves, something that resonates with their own lives and experiences.
All this talk about epic quests has me thinking about something. It's like the principles of good quest design can be applied to so much more than just RPGs.
That's a fascinating thought. What do you mean?
Well, think about it. Emotional stakes, meaningful choices, dynamic interactions. Those are all elements of any good story, whether it's a novel, a movie, or even just a conversation with a friend.
You're absolutely right. And the idea of tailoring a story to the audience's motivations, that's essential in any form of communication.
So maybe we can learn something from RPGs about how to create more engaging and impactful experiences in our everyday lives.
I love that idea. Perhaps we can apply the principles of quest design to our work, our relationships, even our own personal goals.
Imagine approaching a project at work as if it were a quest. What are the challenges? What are the rewards? How can you make it feel meaningful and engaging?
Or think about a personal goal you're trying to achieve. How can you break it down into smaller steps, each with its own challenges and rewards? How can you create a sense of momentum and excitement along the way?
It's about taking the principles of good storytelling and applying them to our own lives to make them more fulfilling and more adventurous.
I love that analogy. It's like we're all on a quest in a way, and we have the power to shape that quest to make it something truly special.
And who knows, maybe by learning from RPGs, we could even level up our own lives.
Now that's a quest worth embarking on.
This has been an incredible journey through the world of quest design. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling energized and inspired to go create some amazing experiences, both in my games and in my life.
Me too. It's clear that the art of quest design is alive and well, and it's only getting more exciting.
Before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I want to give another shout out to LitRPG Reads and author Paul Bello for providing the inspiration for this conversation. And to all of you listening, we'd love to keep the conversation going. How do you approach quest design in your own games? What are some of your favorite quest ideas? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And speaking of leveling up our own lives, let's circle back to those different player styles. I know we touched on this earlier, but it's worth digging a little deeper. Understanding those preferences can really help us tailor our quests, even those classic fetch quests and dungeon crawls.
You're absolutely right. There's a tendency to think of those classic structures as being, somewhat limited. But in 2025, we're seeing game masters reimagine them in really creative ways. A fetch quest, for example, doesn't have to be about physically retrieving an item.
So what are some alternatives to the typical, go find this magic object scenario?
Well, instead of retrieving a physical item, maybe the players need to uncover a lost piece of knowledge, like a forgotten ritual, or even a hidden location.
That's a great way to add depth and intrigue to a seemingly simple task.
And it allows the game master to tie the quest more directly to the player's motivations and the overall narrative.
What about dungeon crawls? Those can sometimes feel a bit repetitive if they're just about fighting monsters room after room.
Definitely. But a dungeon crawl in 2025 can be so much more than just navigating a series of rooms and fighting monsters.
I'm curious to hear how you'd approach a dungeon crawl differently.
Well, one idea is to make the dungeon itself a puzzle. Maybe the rooms shift and change. The architecture, defies logic. Or the players need to decipher clues hidden in the environment to progress. Another approach is to focus on traps and challenges that test the player's ingenuity, rather than their combat skills.
So instead of just hacking and slashing the way through, they have to use their brains and their problem-solving skills to survive.
Exactly. And even in a dungeon crawl, there can be opportunities for role-playing and social encounters. Maybe the players have to negotiate with a rival adventuring party, or convince a captive to help them escape, or even outwit a cunning trap maker.
Those are all great examples of how to make a dungeon crawl more dynamic and engaging.
It's all about thinking outside the box and finding ways to make those classic quest structures feel fresh and exciting for, modern players.
And most importantly, it's about giving players a sense of agency.
That's a crucial point. Players want to feel like they have choices, that their decisions matter, and that they're not just following a, predetermined path.
So how do we as game masters give players that sense of agency within the framework of a classic quest?
One way is to offer multiple paths to the goal, each with its own risks and rewards. Maybe there's a stealthy approach, a diplomatic approach, and a head-on combat approach. Let the players decide how they want to tackle the challenge.
That's a great idea. It allows players to use their unique strengths and play to their preferred styles.
And it adds a layer of replayability to the quest. Players might choose to tackle it differently on a second playthrough just to see how the outcome changes.
Those classic quests really are a framework that we can, build on, adapt, and make our own.
Absolutely. They're a canvas for our creativity.
Hmm?
And in 2025, that canvas is bigger and more vibrant than ever before.
Well, this deep dive has been a real adventure. We've explored the core elements of unforgettable quests, from emotional stakes to dynamic world interactions. We've talked about tailoring quests to different player styles, and we've even touched on the exciting possibilities of AI and procedural generation. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought. And it goes back to something we talked about earlier, about how the principles of good quest design can be applied to other areas of our lives.
I'm interested to hear where you're going with this.
Think about your own life as a quest. What are your goals? What challenges are you facing? What rewards are you striving for?
It's a powerful analogy.
And just like in a well-designed RPG quest, you have choices to make. You can choose to face your challenges head-on, or you can try to find a more creative solution. You can choose to go it alone, or you can seek out allies to help you along the way.
And those choices have consequences. They shape the course of your journey and determine what rewards you ultimately achieve.
Exactly. So the next time you're feeling stuck or lost or unsure what to do next, try thinking like a game master. Look at your life as a quest and ask yourself, what would make this an unforgettable adventure?
What a fantastic way to reframe our challenges and find the inspiration to keep moving forward.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this epic deep dive. A huge thanks to LitRPG Reads and author Paul Bello for the insightful article that inspired this conversation. And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this quest for knowledge. We'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we've discussed. Share your own experiences with memorable quests, your tips for crafting engaging adventures, and your ideas for leveling up your own life in the comments below. Until next time, may your quests be filled with excitement, wonder, and unforgettable moments.
Happy gaming, everyone!